Welcome back to another book discussion. My name is Sylvia, and today's review is on The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a random book club pick. The novel blends murder mystery, science fiction, psychological thriller, and a time loop novel set in an old-timey English countryside. According to the internet, this book is based on our protagonist, Aidan Bishop, who wakes up each day in the body of a different guest at Blackheath Manor, a secluded English estate. He has no memory of his past life or his reason for being there. Aidan soon discovers that he is trapped in a time loop, reliving the same day over and over again. Each day culminates in the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, the daughter of the house. Aidan must solve the mystery of Evelyn's murder within 8 days, or he will be eternally trapped in the repeating cycle. To complicate matters, Aidan isn't the only one aware of the time loop. Other guests at Blackheath Manor also seem to know what's happening, and some may even be involved in the murder. Aidan must navigate this complex web of deceit and betrayal, gathering clues from each new perspective he experiences, to break the cycle and escape his fate. Before getting into the rest of the review, I would like to take this time to talk about the structure of the book, as the writer actually does some really great things with the tropes and elements of the time loop fiction genre. The main character, Aidan, is not the only person stuck in the loop. Now, this is something I've seen before in TV shows and movies as well. I've never read a time loop book where there was more than one character stuck in a loop at this point, but I'm still trying to make my way through them. I felt like by doing this, we kind of get over that hill of I'm a crazy person who is stuck in a loop, so obviously I'm crazy and this is not really happening, because you do have another character saying, you're sane, you're okay, I'm also in this with you and we're going to solve this together. So I think that's really nice, and we're not sitting there questioning the whole time, is this character crazy? Is this how the book's going to end, where we find out that they're like in a psych ward or something? So I really appreciated that. It also feels like you have someone to bounce ideas off of. At the same time, it does add some suspense and some conflict, because the reader, or at least me as the reader, was wondering, can we really trust the other people who are stuck in this loop? Another fun element that was added is that in this time loop, we actually have a time limit. So it doesn't go on forever and ever. From the point that we start and the point it ends, we have 8 days with our character, Aidan Bishop. By eliminating infinite time, it really adds a lot of suspense and that whole ticking time bomb in the background that we only have 8 days. If not, there is no loop after that, and we are not going to escape this place. We will be trapped forever. What's also great is, as we read on, we find out that there is somebody actually actively trying to kill our protagonist. So not only does he have to solve a mystery of who is actually killing Evelyn Hardcastle every night, we have all of these times where our character tries to stop and figure out clues and think, but then he can't because he's on the run from a killer. This also helps set up a sense of urgency in the book. Then there's what I call the demonitis. And how it's really like this effect, which I think is fabulous. So if you guys recall, maybe you don't, in the Scooby-Doo movies, yes, I'm going there, to the Scooby-Doo movies for a reference, there is this triangle relic called the demonitis. And when the group or the gang actually touch it, it switches out all of their, I don't know, you could call them souls, I suppose, or the hosts of the body around until they're all in different bodies. I think at one point, Shaggy is in Daphne's body and he's like, oh, Daph, don't you ever eat? And it's really, really funny. And so that's what I was thinking about as I was reading this book. So not only do you have a looper book, you also have the fact that he's not alone in the loop, and there's actually more than one person who seems to know what's going on in the loop. Then we have the fact that he has to solve a mystery and he's running from a killer. Plus we have the demonitis, which is just what I'm calling it. Essentially, every single day he gets a different host. So we're not staying in the same person, which is a lot of work for the reader. And I think this would be really, really great if they did this in like a limited series or as movies, so we could keep, like, the faces are easier to keep than all of the names and the few like tidbits and like physical features that we get of each of the characters. Now we come to the part where I talk about the difficulties of such a convoluted book. There are so many different storylines going on in here. There's like many sub-stories, which we'll talk about next. But some of the things that made it more complicated, that was really hard as a reader to follow, are the fact that there were so many characters. I actually had to print out a list just to help me out. Now, if you have the book version, there is a list, I believe, in the beginning of the book of everyone, all of the characters, which is very helpful. But at first, I was originally listening to this on an audiobook and I was like, no way. I need to flip back. I kept rewinding and that wasn't helpful. I really did need to see it on the page. So I ended up, after the first month, waiting for the book to come to my library because they didn't actually carry it. So I had to get an interlibrary loan for the same book later on, like a month and a half later, where I finally finished it. So I'm going to say it again. If you don't have the physical copy in front of you, I highly recommend that you figure that out. The audiobook was a lot of fun. I really did appreciate it, but there was just so much to hold on to. I found that I really appreciated the book and flipping back and forth to find things. The other struggle was there were so many storylines that it was really hard to decide what clues were important, what to hold on to, and what to let go of. I just wasn't sure. And so that probably works in the writer's favor more than the reader because you forget things, you drop things. There are a lot of red herrings. So it's really hard. I had a lot of guesses about a lot of different things. I was guessing that at one point, maybe Anna was actually one of Aidan Bishop, our protagonist's hosts. And he actually only stayed in the men, which I guess a lot of people probably appreciate. And then at one point I thought maybe Anna was like Aidan and she was hopping into other female bodies in the book, like maybe even Evelyn Hardcastle. That didn't end up happening. That would have been cool, but there was so much going on that I'm grateful that it wasn't that. The other part of the confusion, and this was another interesting element that the writer used, which is at some point it was explained by the plague doctor, who's kind of trying to walk us through all of this, that our protagonist was going to get only one day with each of his hosts. So basically, since there were 8 days in the loop, he would have 8 different hosts. But then it became even more complicated when the plague doctor tried to explain that if one of his hosts fell asleep, because some of them were old and frail and others, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, had been badly beaten and so he was in and out of consciousness, anytime they fell asleep, he would jump forward into another host. But when that host from the past who was sleeping woke up, he would jump back. And so that became confusing. Yes, at the beginning of the chapter, it would say what day we were on instead of whose body they were in. So like, let's say you were on day 6, but you had to go back to day 3 because somebody woke up. That was a little confusing at first. And again, it's really a little easier to see when you can flip back and forth and be like, okay, I know where we're at, but kind of difficult to follow. Now let's talk about the big reveal of who done it, because at the heart of this, even though it's a looper, even though it's very sci-fi-esque, it is a murder mystery, and we are trying to find out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. Because there were so many storylines, it became a little confusing, and it was definitely a little harder to guess what was going to happen at the end because there were a lot of red herrings and a lot of things to tie up. But we eventually find out that Evelyn Hardcastle was killed by Felicity. I believe her last name was Maddox. And so our character ends up telling the plague doctor and getting released from the loop. Did I have a guess at some point that this was going to be Felicity that ends up killing Evelyn Hardcastle? Yes, I did, because there's so much being thrown at you that you're like, okay, well, that's one thing I might think it is. By the end of it, because there were so many characters, I had like 50 guesses. I mean, probably not 50, but I'm saying like maybe 15. Now let's talk about the main storylines that I found in this book. And I'm just going off of what I remember and some of the notes that I took. I think at the end I found that there were about 7 main ones that I wanted to talk about and break this book down into. Okay, so the first storyline is that Aidan Bishop is stuck in a loop and has to find out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle. I love a good murder mystery. It's enjoyable. I believe that at the end of the book, The author talked about Agatha Christie being one of his favorites, and this feels true to that. Storyline 2 is with Anna, and she is also stuck in the time loop with Aiden. But unlike Aiden, she stays in her body all of the time. It seems that Anna this go around is on Aiden's side and trusts him completely. Then we have storyline 3, and like I mentioned before, I thought that maybe Anna was going to be jumping bodies like our protagonist. I also thought that maybe Anna was Evelyn Hardcastle at some point, but I wasn't really sure. Again, with the red herrings, he did a really great job, and I couldn't really pin down who I really thought did it. Storyline 3 was with Thomas Hardcastle, who is Evelyn Hardcastle's youngest brother, and he died when he was a little boy 19 years ago. The family sort of blames her for this because she was supposed to be watching her little brother, and it seems that her mother holds the biggest grudge, and there were a lot of really good red herrings with the mother because we couldn't see her or find her throughout the whole book, and I kept thinking this mother has to be dead, but I wasn't really sure. There was at least a fleeting moment, again I had 15 guesses, where I thought maybe her mother had actually been the killer this whole time. Now this storyline also involves other people like Charlie Carver, who was I think maybe one of the groundskeepers who ended up being the person who was blamed for Thomas Hardcastle's death. Now, he was never found. There was another person that was supposed to be his accomplice who ended up being killed by Ted Stanwin. So Stanwin is involved in this storyline as well. We have the fact that eventually, as you read on, you learn that Ted Stanwin has had a child out of wedlock. It's one of the maids. I believe her name was Lucy. And he is blackmailing all of these people. And we think he's somewhat of an evil guy. That's true, he is. But he also was really good friends with Charlie Carver. And so they decided that Charlie Carver was the killer. Stanwin knew that wasn't true. And in order to go along with the story that the Hardcastles had created, he was paid a significant amount of money and was actually blackmailing the Hardcastles along with a lot of these prominent lawyers that work with the Hardcastles. Now, this storyline was really interesting to me because it breaks off into other branches. So not only do you have this little boy, Thomas Hardcastle, who gets killed, you also have another young boy named Keith Parker, I believe, who went missing. He was a stable boy around the same time that Thomas was killed. And I think that, I can't remember because I didn't write a note, that maybe Charlie Carver and his accomplice were also just blamed for this boy. And I don't think that people really believed that, but that's sort of, I think, what happened. So there is this mystery of what happened to this little boy who was a stable boy. And also, how does this tie in with Tim Hardcastle? And I kept thinking about, what did these boys see? They must have seen something, which is technically true. And I was trying to tie it to what was happening in the present with Evelyn dying now. There is also another host of our protagonist named Jim Rashton. And Rashton is a police constable. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. And his storyline was very interesting because his wife used to play on the grounds of the Hardcastle manor when she was little. So she actually was there the day that Thomas Hardcastle was killed, and she saw him right before he died. So you really get to see some of the benefits of our main protagonist getting to body jump every day into a different host, because, you know, when you're a police officer, a constable, not everyone's going to talk to you because they're scared. And there's a couple of times when our protagonist is jumping into other bodies and he's getting information from people he normally wouldn't if he was just, you know, the butler one day, because he's a butler at one point. So I really, really liked how the author did that. And I really enjoyed the storyline, I think, the most out of all of them. There's probably one more, but this one was really great. And the story that I love the most was probably the storyline that I've written down as storyline number 4, which is about Helena Hardcastle. Now, she was married to Peter Hardcastle. These are the parents of Evelyn. So Helena was carrying on with Charlie Carver, who is the man they claim killed her son Thomas. And she ended up, already being pregnant when she got married to Peter Hardcastle. So she had to figure out something. And this is like, again, the story gets kind of convoluted, but I really liked this storyline. Yes, it has something to do with what happened in the past and in the present to Evelyn Hardcastle, but at the same time, I guess maybe you could get away with not having that, but I really liked it. So as the story goes on, we find out that Helena had someone take her baby away, and she told her husband that the baby died in childbirth because he wasn't home with her at the time. Then she found out he was having an affair, and she paid the mistress to pretend that her son, Helena Hardcastle's son, was the son of the mistress and Peter. So this mistress comes to the house and says, "I've had your kid." And Peter is like horrified. He doesn't want this to get out in the papers and ruin his business and ruin his reputation as an upstanding citizen. So they pay the cook to take this child, which they have named, the cook ends up naming Charlie Cunningham or something like that. And he is actually Lord Ravenclaw's valet. I know. So connecting all of this stuff, it sounds convoluted trying to even explain it. But I really loved that. I thought it was really great. I enjoyed her story. I thought she was an evil, vindictive woman, and I really liked her. And there was some conversation about the fact that Evelyn was really playing this off, and giving the baby to the cook meant that Peter Hardcastle, her husband, would have to look at his mistake every single day, which I thought was like, oh my gosh, I'm really loving this character. And I'm sad that we never really got to meet her. And once again, this is another storyline where the author took really great opportunities to include the other hosts that our protagonist was going to jump into, like Ravenclaw, because we got to talk with Charlie Cunningham, the valet, and learn some stuff from him. We also got to talk to Peter Hardcastle about this through one of his solicitors, one of the lawyers. And that was really interesting story to learn about. And I think that was one of my favorite characters too, as one of the solicitors, because there was just so much information that we were getting through that character that we wouldn't have gotten probably from the first host, or even if Aiden was just Aiden in the loop. The fifth storyline was very interesting. So this was about the switch of Evelyn Hardcastle and her maid Madeline. And I hope I'm getting this right because I'm going from my memory, and I did take some notes, but it's convoluted. So I was getting confused trying to explain it to myself. So what we end up finding out is that Evelyn Hardcastle has this friend, Felicity Maddox, that she's written to, and it turns out that Felicity Maddox is actually someone that Evelyn Hardcastle has hired to play her. So every day that Evelyn has died for 7 of the days, it's actually been Felicity who has died. Evelyn, the real Evelyn Hardcastle, would you please stand up, like an Eminem situation? She is actually pretending to be a maid, Madeline, which is technically Evelyn Hardcastle's maid. And that was kind of confusing and very interesting because I feel like there were some breadcrumbs there, but I kept thinking that it was, like I mentioned before, Anna who was pretending to be Evelyn, and I can't remember why I thought that, but I did. So I was almost there, but not really. I kind of missed that one. Now, this storyline also includes Gregory Gold, who is one of Aiden's hosts. And Gregory Gold is a painter. So he has been hired to repaint all of the paintings of the Hardcastles that are on the walls and stuff. And there's some of this like kind of sprinkled throughout. It's more towards the end. So I couldn't guess it as well, this plot, until towards the end. I felt like it was very clear then, but it wasn't, I don't think, pulled throughout the book enough for me to really understand until the author was kind of like really trying to, kind of shove it down our throat. On to the storyline that I have numbered 6, and these are not in any particular order, but this is the storyline of Aiden being not only stuck in the loop, but stuck in the loop with bad guys. So we have one bad person named Silvertear, aka Josephine. And I thought every time I heard that name, I laughed out loud because it reminded me of a James Bond character. It was very James Bond-esque. And I remember really laughing at the evil name. It was almost like Dr. Evil, but it's like Silvertear. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's like a code name kind of a situation. I don't know. And then we have the Footman, who is this mystery man who is killing all the people. Like just randomly on days, he's killing people. He's trying to kill all of Aiden's hosts. And then we eventually find out that, I think his first name is Daniel. I just call him Coolridge. But Daniel Coolridge is actually not one of Aiden's hosts. At some point, he tells us that he is. And this is something I really missed when I was reading. I just honestly believed him because we had met other hosts, or this is the other part that's kind of convoluted. I'm going to try to explain it the best way I can because I didn't write it down. But Aiden does meet himself in the loop. So it's him just like a day or 3 days ahead. And so that was also a confusing thing that I had to hold on to. And so when Daniel Coolridge tells us, hey, I'm one of your hosts, I'm like 5 days ahead or whatever he says, I just believed him because I was already holding on to too much information at that point. And I thought, sure, why not? And it was a little too late for me when I realized, oh, he's a liar and he's not one of his hosts. He's just one of the people who knows what's happening in the loop. We also have the good guys, or what we're calling the good guys, in this sixth storyline. So we have the Plague Doctor, and the Plague Doctor is basically kind of there to give him information just randomly, more for the reader, I think, than Aiden. But yeah, he's giving information to Aiden as well. And then we also have Anna, who seems to be on Aiden's side and really trusting him at the time. Then we go to the last storyline for me, which is number 7, and there might be more, but these are like the main ones that I felt you could really focus and pull chunks out of the book to add to. This is the one where we're actually in a simulation or a futuristic jail, if you will, that puts prisoners in a cold case crime, I think is how they explained it. And they kind of play out this simulation. And if you can find the killer, guess who the killer is, and tell the Plague Doctor, you have earned the right to either escape or the right to your freedom. Then we find out that the game is basically rigged, and that even though Anna is getting very close to escaping with Aiden and telling the Plague Doctor who killed Evelyn Hardcastle, there is the character that's known as Silvertear, the Bond person, the Bond girl, named Josephine. And she has been really like stacking the deck against her, which is really fascinating. And it's been really hard on the Plague Doctor because he's trying to kind of correct all of the things that Josephine has done to allow them to actually have a winner in a fair way. Now, this really reminded me, the whole simulation situation, whatever you want to call it. This really reminded me of one of my favorite movies called Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. They are both actually, one's a criminal and the other one's a cop, but because the cop has done all of this crazy stuff to try to catch this criminal, they are both, I believe they call it cryogenically frozen in time. Well, Wesley Snipes' character, the criminal, ends up getting out, and because the future is a lot calmer and peaceful, they don't know how to catch criminals. They don't know what to do with him. So they unfreeze Wesley Snipes' character, who is the cop that's, done some questionable things, to catch him. And there's a lot of discussion in there about how prisons are unhumane and how when they were cryogenically frozen, they were having nightmares. And that's not something that's supposed to happen. They're supposed to be like frozen in time where they don't feel any pain, they don't do anything. And, Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone's character are saying that's not true. We were definitely being tortured while we were frozen, with memories and thoughts and feelings. And so there is this whole conversation throughout the book about if jails are humane and prisons are humane, and we're taking in people, but we're not necessarily trying to help them be better people when we release them. We're sometimes making bigger, stronger criminals than when they went in. And so I really liked the conversation that was like, the underlying meaning throughout the book. There was also something else I wanted to mention, and this wasn't necessarily a big storyline, but I guess we can call it a bonus one. Aiden, we don't know why he is in the loop, but at some point the plague doctor tells him that he chose to be there. And we learn that there are criminals in the loop and that Anna was a criminal. Of course, the footman was a murderer as well. And so they're being punished in this prison by reliving the day over and over again. And so Aiden's like, well, if I'm not a killer, why am I here if this is a prison? And so the plague doctor tells him that his sister was killed, Aiden's sister. Her name was Juliet. And the killer was actually Anna, this person he's come to care for. The only word or thing that he remembered was the name Anna. It's the first thing he called out when he woke up in the loop the first day, at least the first day when we started reading. And now you have Aiden forced to sit there and say, do I leave Anna, when my only purpose at this point was to not only get out, but to take her with him. You know, the plague doctor tells him that he can erase their memories and they can go live their lives. And Aiden has decided that even though revenge is a really big theme in this book, that he has chosen justice over revenge. And he feels like Anna has done her time. I think at some point they talk about 30 years. I don't know if it's 30 years for Anna. I can't remember how long Aiden has been in there. But if you think about it, if you're getting murdered, because I think the footman finds her a lot and kills her, you're getting murdered every single day for 30 years, 365 days a year, and then sometimes 366. That's wild. That is a lot of torture. That I don't think is justice. That is definitely revenge. When Aiden finds out that he entered the simulation because he wanted to kill Anna, he really has to look at himself as a person. And so I think that in the end, Anna had to grow as a person and learn that killing people and the things that she was doing before was not working for her, and to trust people and be a better person. And I think Aiden had to get to that point too. And it almost seems like they had to get at that point at the same time in order for them both to be able to tell the plague doctor, who ended up killing Evelyn Hardcastle, and getting out of there. And the book ends on kind of a little bit of an ambiguous ending. Do they get out or not? I think they do, but we don't get to see the simulation end and how the world is now in the future. Which is okay. Like, I think a lot of people wanted a second book for that. I wouldn't mind it. I would totally read it. I hope that it would be a loop or two in some way, but I don't know. It's very interesting. We are also left with the fact that the plague doctor, I don't think he calls himself a guard. I did write down what the word was that he called himself, but I can't remember. He is going to get into some trouble for letting them both out, because it seems that people like Josephine, who actually work for, if we're going to call this a jail, or the system rather, don't want people to get out. They want them to stay in. And that is wild. In every single loop that the plague doctor had seen Aiden in and Anna, he had studied them. They had been studying these people, and what they did and different situations, how they reacted before they came to this point where they were willing to leave together as better people. So all in all, I highly recommend this book, even though it is kind of convoluted and you have to read very thoroughly and take some notes and to understand everything. And honestly, it was one kind of thorough read. I probably would need a second one to appreciate all of the different elements and the storylines in this book. I hope to pick it up eventually sometime in the future. Right now I have too many books to get through, but it was a fun read. It was a good read, and I do recommend it. Okay, so that has been my review of The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And the last thing I wanted to say was I was looking at some book club questions for this book, and one of the questions they had was about the title, like the 7.5 deaths. So I believe where that comes from, and I could be wrong, I'm just going by the facts and what I remember from the book, is that for 7 of the 8 days, Felicity Maddox died pretending to be Evelyn Hardcastle. And on the 8th day, about halfway through, when they solved the murder, the plague doctor gave Felicity the option to kill Evelyn Hardcastle, the real one. So she did. I believe she shot her. I think that's what ended up happening. And so that half a death was actually the real Evelyn Hardcastle, which was very cool and very interesting. All right, so don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to read a book, write a book. Sincerely, Sylvia.